Chapter 21. The Ritual. Ambrose shook himself. This apparition malarkey has few aspects to recommend it, other than actually getting you where you need to be. You wanted to be here, Harry reminded him. Oh, I'm not sure about that, Harry. The word wanted gives the decision a great deal more of an air of volition than is truly warranted. It is true, however, that I felt we ought to be here. With a faint pop, Draco and Lydia apparated beside them. How are you, Lydia dear? Ambrose inquired. Lydia frowned. I think I could get used to it if I was in control. Dennis and Hermione approached them out of the gloom. Ron and Ginny are keeping lookout up ahead, said Dennis. I think everyone is inside. They must have come by Flu Network, or else they've apparated directly into the house. We could see people moving around, so we know they're there. You left Ron and Ginny together. Harry sounded horrified. If they start bickering, they'll give us all away. Oh, Harry, Hermione scolded. Ron is a professional. You, of all people, should know that. Harry stared at her. And Ginny is his sister, and she's, well, Ginny. Perhaps we should join them, Ambrose suggested, before the outbreak of hostilities. They moved as carefully as they could through the undergrowth, until they could see the house with its gravelled drive. Fortunately, the moon was quite full, and the sky mostly clear. Wand lights were not needed. They could hear Ginny heatedly whispering as they neared the lookouts. Ginny and Ron were kneeling behind a rhododendron bush, close to the driveway. Harry crept ahead of the others and crouched down between them. After a brief hissed exchange, the three of them fell silent. The others joined and crouched with them. People inside, numbers unknown, Ron reported to the group. Any insights, Lydia? Harry asked lightly. She thought for a few moments. Oh! She exclaimed with a violent shiver. What is it? Harry asked. Nobody will die in this house tonight. Oh, that's promising, Ron grinned. People will be hurt. Someone who isn't here will be hurt. They'll be, I'm not sure of the right word. They'll be sort of wounded, but nobody will see it. She looked visibly shaken, even in the moonlight. Well, let's hope it's Aloria, Ron whispered. Okay, said Harry. Ambrose, you stay here with Lydia. We'll go in and break up their party. Dennis started taking small phials of potion out of his pockets. What was it you called it, Ambrose? Tincture of indifference? I know it sounds like a euphemism for gin and tonic, but yes, Ambrose confirmed. I hope you have sufficient for us all. Ambrose, Harry began. Harry, my dear boy, Dennis's wondrous potions should keep us out of harm's way, so long as we do nothing to draw attention to ourselves. But if Lydia has another important insight, what we can do from out here would be severely limited. Harry regarded Ambrose and Lydia in the silvery light. Does make sense, Harry, Ron nodded. Harry rubbed his right temple. Hermione, he asked. She pursed her lips and sighed. I don't like it either, but I do think he's right. I don't know why I ever agreed to bring you with us in the first place. Try to stay quiet and out of harm's way, Harry advised. We don't know what we'll find or what sort of magic might be flying around. Ginny, can you take responsibility for getting them out and back to ours, if I give you the nod? Rebellion flashed across Ginny's eyes, but she must have thought better of it. She blinked and then agreed. How do we get in? Asked Harry. Ginny will tell you. Ron sounded impressed. There was a charm on the door at the last meeting, she explained. Dennis described it to us. Ron and I have been watching, and it's the same here. I looked it up a couple of days ago. It's called Roxburgh's Seal. So I researched it. There's a counter-charm. Harry's eyebrows shot up and he grinned. That's seriously impressive and a bit scary. I take it you know the counter-charm? I practiced it most of yesterday, Ginny confirmed. Watch and learn, Aura boys. She got to her feet, and the others followed her in line to the door of the house. As they gathered around her, Dennis checked that they'd all taken the contents of the files he had handed out. Once they had all confirmed, Jenny touched the tip of her wand to the door and drew a complicated pattern, whilst muttering an incantation. A rosy glow spread out across the surface of the door. A click sounded, and it opened. Ginny turned to smile at Harry and Ron, then she gently pushed the door open. They filed inside without a sound and looked around. They were in a spacious but hardly grand entrance hall, with a wide staircase to one side. Doors led from either side and also towards the back of the house ahead of them. For a moment Lydia panicked. She felt as though she was standing there alone, and yet not alone. She felt someone take her hand, and suddenly the realization that it was the effect of Dennis's potion welled up inside her. Uncle Ambrose had her hand. She looked up at him, and that familiar crinkle-eyed smile told her everything was all right. The others were there too, somewhere. She took a breath to calm herself. A smell of furniture polish hung in the air. She could hear a low sound, a droning. It had a rhythm to it. Voices were chanting in the distance, beyond the door to their right. She followed her uncle as he moved towards the door. It opened. There was someone next to it, or perhaps more than one someone. It must be Harry and the others. Ambrose led her through the door. The room beyond had subdued lighting. There were bookcases, a baby grand piano, a sofa, 2 chairs, and a coffee table. The sound of the chanting was clearer and closer now. It was coming from beyond the double doors at the further side of the room. The light seeping under the double doors was warm and flickering. There must be a large fire or lit torches in the room beyond. Shadowy figures were moving towards the double doors on their side. The others must be getting ready to burst in on whatever ritual lay beyond. As if a veil was suddenly dropped from her eyes, Lydia could see beyond the closed doors, into the room filled with chanting people. Inside were a dozen, more, perhaps 20, figures gathered there. Some stood in a circle around a throne-like chair. They were surrounded by an outer circle standing several paces back towards the walls. Upon the throne was a small boy. Somehow she knew he was 7 years old, nearly 8. He was not fully conscious, as if drugged or enchanted in some way. He had a strong bond with one of the figures in front of him. It was not a bond of blood or kinship, but one of trust. Hard on the heels of the sudden insight into the room beyond, these flashes of knowledge still scared her. Several thoughts and implications raced through her mind. They were outnumbered by perhaps 3 to 1 by the congregation beyond those doors. Some were close to the doors, and their attention would be drawn to them opening. They would expect to see people opening the doors and entering the room. The tincture's spell would be broken, and Harry's squad would be seen. She had to stop them. But in the instant her muscles tensed to spring forward and call out, she saw the events ahead split in two. 2 possible futures were shown to her. In one she ran forwards and called to Harry to stop. She was too late. Harry opened the doors. The watchers beyond heard her shout and turned towards the doors. Harry and the others stepped through. Wands were raised all around. Spells flew. Figures crumpled to the floor. That future came to an end. In the other future she was shown, she made no sound. Harry opened the doors. 1 or 2 of the watchers beyond saw the doors open and figures step through. Confused, they raised their wands. Harry and the others managed to send their spells first. Noise and pandemonium erupted. This future stretched away into the distance. Lydia screwed up her face and said nothing. Uncle Ambrose must have felt her tense up. He dragged her to one side of the doorway as the others stepped through it. Flashes of red light and shouting came from the other room. In the midst of the noise there rose a high-pitched scream. Lydia looked to her uncle. "We must save the little boy." Ambrose nodded, grim-faced. "Move with care. Stay close to the walls until you see a way through." The 2 of them slid around the edge of the doorway. Lydia felt a huge surge of something like pride for her uncle. He had not questioned her or dissuaded her. He had trusted she was making the best of her insight. She might have wept with joy had there been any time. The room was already littered with stunned bodies. Their raiding party was still complete, stunning, parrying, and shielding as a team. Most of the congregation of Death Eaters, if that was what they were around or behind the throne. Two of them, a tall, dark-haired wizard and a slightly shorter wizard with white blonde hair, were between the throne and Harry's raiders, fighting skillfully. Lydia saw a way through to the throne. She stepped gently forwards and almost sauntered towards the cowering boy who crouched at the foot of it. Ambrose was somewhere beside her all the way. She saw the two Death Eaters fought not only with wands. One also held what appeared to be a sceptre, the other wielding a crystal the size of a goose egg. As they neared the boy, who was huddled beside the throne, the dark-haired wizard brandished the crystal. It shot a lilac beam towards Harry. Hermione threw a shield charm in front of him, which deflected the lilac light. But at the same moment, the other wizard sent a streak of pale green from the sceptre, which enveloped Hermione. She stood frozen for a moment, then folded limply to the floor. Draco screamed with rage. Another scream came from the far end of the room. Lydia spun round. Ron had worked his way behind those cowering on the further side of the throne, and had picked several of them off under the cover of the tincture. Now he sprang forward, all too visible. Two members of the congregation turned on Ron, their wands raised. Dennis, who had also been working his way around them, shot a shield charm in front of Ron. Ginny shot a stunning spell at the blonde Death Eater. He managed to block it, but was knocked off balance. Ambrose pushed Lydia towards the boy and the throne, as he leapt at the stumbling Death Eater. The dark-haired Death Eater raised the crystal again, aiming at Harry. Ambrose grabbed the blonde Death Eater's wand hand and pointed it at the other, shouting, "Confrango!" A ball of something golden shot out from the wand and hit the taller Death Eater in the face. As he staggered, another beam of lilac light shot out wildly. It struck Draco in the chest. Harry and Ginny shot stunning spells, which hit the dark-haired Death Eater, flinging him back past the throne. Ambrose elbowed the shorter Death Eater in the face, then pushed him over, falling on top of him. The sceptre skittered away across the tiled floor. Ron and Dennis stunned the few remaining members of the congregation who were still on their feet, then ran to Hermione. As Lydia turned to the boy on the floor beside her, she thought she heard a sound, something like a chicken clucking. She shook her head. That was not possible. "Hello," she said to the boy. "Are you all right? My name's Lydia." "Am I a wizard now?" asked the boy, looking dazed. "My name's Thomas. There's a chicken behind you." Lydia looked over her shoulder. There was indeed a chicken standing there. It tilted its head and stared at her. She also saw Draco. He seemed unharmed, but his face blazed with fury. He and Ambrose were standing over the blonde Death Eater, who had been disarmed. With a jolt, she recognised him. It was Draco's father, who had trapped them in Throckley Mine. Further across the room, Ginny, Ron and Dennis were on their knees beside Hermione's unmoving figure. Harry was walking towards the throne. He came over to Lydia and knelt down. "Hi, I'm okay," she reassured him. "This is Thomas. He seems to be all right, but confused." "Draco, you're alive," the blonde Death Eater was saying as Lydia looked around the room. Lucius. That was the name she'd been trying to remember. "What does that crystal do?" Ambrose asked him. We weren't sure," Death Eater stammered. "It's some sort of powerful curse, as far as we could understand from the grimoire." "Well, it hasn't done anything to me," Draco spat. "Maybe we should try it on you." "Excuse me a sec," Harry said to Lydia. "Please look after Thomas. There's something I must do." Harry stood up. He frowned with concentration for a few seconds and then held up his wand. A silvery white haze formed at the tip, then suddenly disappeared. Lydia looked at Thomas. He was smiling, but looked dazed. Lydia decided he was safe for the moment, and looked up again. "Dennis!" Harry called, and beckoned him over. "How is Hermione?" asked Harry as he strode up. "We don't know." Dennis's voice was constricted, his face contorted with worry. "She's breathing, but we don't know." Do you have any Veritas serum? We need to question Malfoy. The blast of the snake, it was called in the grimoire, Lucius Malfoy was saying. Blast of the serpent, Draco nodded. And the crystal? Beloved blood, Lucius replied. But you feel well? Yes, Draco began. Remember what Lydia said, Draco, Ambrose interrupted. Someone would be injured who is not here. Perhaps someone related to you. Perhaps that is the explanation of beloved blood. The angry colour drained from Draco's face. If you have cursed Scorpius... No, not I, Draco. You are in this up to your neck, you slimy... Draco drew himself up. The muscles in his jaw were clenching and unclenching. He turned to Harry. I think I can help Hermione, now that I know what the curse was. Harry nodded. Go. Leave the mudblood, Lucius sneered. Draco convulsed and rounded on his father. His nostrils flared, his eyes glared, and his fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles were bloodless. Don't ever... Go to Scorpius. Make sure our boy is well. He is not your boy. He's no longer your grandson. I'm not your son, remember? You left me to die. Draco turned on his heel and strode to where Hermione lay flanked by Ron and Ginny. Veritas serum, please, Harry said to Dennis. Ambrose went to sit cross-legged on the floor with Lydia and Thomas. The chicken wandered into the group and sat on the floor between Ambrose and Lydia. It shook itself for a moment and puffed up its feathers. Lydia thought it looked as though it was settling down to listen to a story. Hello, young man, Ambrose said to Thomas. My name is Ambrose. He's my uncle, Lydia explained. She felt proud to admit it. Thomas nodded. He was shivering, though the room was warm. My name's Thomas. Well, Thomas, Ambrose smiled. You've had a funny sort of evening, haven't you? Some people are coming to tidy this place up. I expect you'd like to see your mum and dad. Thomas nodded enthusiastically. We'll get someone to take you home and explain everything to them. Then you can have a good sleep in your own bed. Ambrose took off his jacket and wrapped it around the boy. Everything is going to seem a lot better in the morning. A good sleep always helps, I find. Ambrose and Lydia continued talking to Thomas. All around them auras apparated into the room to take away the members of the ritual congregation. Healers were brought in from St. Mungo's Hospital. Ron and Draco accompanied the healers as they took Hermione. Harry and Dennis finished questioning Lucius Malfoy before letting the auras take him and Rabastan into custody. Ginny came over to sit with Lydia and Thomas, while Ambrose went to explain the boy's situation to the auras. A young female aura took charge of Thomas. She chatted with him about his home and his parents, and he gave her the address. She asked Harry to authorise a portkey, then took him back to his home, Ambrose retrieving his jacket first. Harry walked up to Ambrose. That was quick thinking, using Lucius to attack Rabastan. But what actually happened? Ambrose smiled wryly. I entertained the notion that if Mr. Malfoy were holding his wand, and I said the words of a spell, he might think that same spell and make it happen. Which is, in essence, precisely what occurred, I believe. I merely assisted him in pointing the wand in the right direction, my dear boy. Ginny had joined them by now. But the actual spell? Ginny inquired. Ronald had used some manner of blasting spell when we were at Throckley Mine looking for Harry. I recall now that it was actually Confringo. And you said? Ginny asked. I said Confrango, Ambrose admitted. This, I believe now, is something I had remembered from a packet of cat food. It means with chicken. Portuguese, if I'm not mistaken. Presumably the excess of old magic due to the ritual made it happen so effectively. Now we have a magical chicken in our midst. Or at least a chicken born of magic. It appears she and Lydia have bonded. Lydia was sitting cross-legged by the throne, the chicken pecking playfully at her fingertips. The others laughed, as much with relief as with amusement. Is there any way one of you could produce some chicken feed, perhaps? Ambrose asked hopefully, before the chicken either faints from hunger or considers becoming carnivorous. We have chickens at my parents' house, Ginny explained, using her wand to summon a small bag of feed and passing it to a grateful Ambrose. Thank you ever so much, he said with a smile. It is always gratifying to circumvent unnecessary bloodshed. Ron and Draco have gone with Hermione to St. Mungo's, Harry told them all. Draco is confident he can help with the old magic aspects. Ron might join us later. I'm not sure he should. I'd like his help, but I think he wants revenge now. That's not a good state of mind for doing his job. Maybe you could include him as a friend, not as Aurora Granger Weasley, Ginny suggested, with a grim look. Dennis stepped in. Malfoy told us that Lauria Rackison has some known at Hogwarts. A member of staff? Ambrose suggested. Harry sighed and nodded. Most likely. Unless it's a student, there are only a few people we can't vouch for. We need to tread carefully, and we shouldn't close our minds to any of the possibilities. Dennis looked to Lydia. Do you have any feelings about this, Lydia? She screwed up her eyes for a second. Nothing yet, sorry. Don't apologise, Dennis smiled kindly. I think we should go to Hogsmeade, said Harry. Tem said there is a fireplace here that is on the Floo network. He left me some Floo powder too. Hannah and Neville would be happy to have us arrive at the broomsticks. I'll send a Patronus to let Hannah know. She should be in the bar at this time of night. That's a long way for a Patronus, Harry, Dennis said. He's done London to Hogwarts before now, said Ginny with a note of pride. She winked at Harry. Dennis laughed. Why would I ever doubt the great Harry Potter when it comes to Patronuses? Ginny shrugged. Dunno. Because you're an idiot, perhaps? That must be it, Dennis nodded.